So let's just see how we can implement the queue and all of its operations with the help of one array. So as we know, array is the contiguous memory locations, and here we use the index to store the elements, and the array indexing starts from 0. So the first position will have the index 0, 1, 2 and so on. Now here we can use this array to implement the queue. So here we need the pointer, so we need the front pointer, and also we need the rear pointer. So initially, because our queue will be empty, so both of them will point to -1. So first of all, let's just see how we can implement the enqueue operation. Enqueue means whenever we add a new element into our queue. So here we have the function to perform the enqueue operation. The function takes the value that we wanted to add into our queue. So first of all, we're gonna check if the queue is full or not. So if the rear is equal to the size of the array -1, that means our queue is full. Otherwise, if we have space in our queue, in that case we're gonna check if the front is pointing to -1, that means our queue is empty. So first of all, we're gonna assign 0 to the front. That means the front pointer will point to this 0th index, and after that we're gonna store the value into the next rear position. So that means we have to increase the rear, and then we're gonna store the value right here in that index. So suppose we are calling the enqueue function and we are passing the value 10. So that means we wanted to add 10 into our queue. So initially, because our queue is empty, so both of the pointers will point to -1. So first of all, the front will be pointing to 0th index. So this front will point to this 0th index, and then we're gonna increase the rear pointer, and then we're gonna store the value in that position. So that means the rear will be pointing to the next position, that means this 0th index, and then our value 10 will be stored in that position. So this way we can call the enqueue function, and we can add the value 20 into our queue. So that means first of all it will check if the queue is full or not. So the queue is not full because new values will be added into the rear position. So the rear will be incremented, and in that position we're gonna store this value 20. So this way we can call our enqueue function, and we can add values in the rear position. So the rear will be incremented, and this new value will be added into our queue. And this is how we can perform the enqueue operation. So let's now see how we can perform the dequeue operation. Dequeue means removing elements from the front of the queue. So here we have a function to perform the dequeue operation. So first of all, we're gonna check if the front is pointing to -1 or if the front is greater than rear. So in both of the cases, we're gonna say that the queue is empty. Otherwise, if we have elements in the queue, so first of all, we're gonna get the element from the front of the queue, and then we're gonna increment the queue. So that means if we call the dequeue function, so if the queue is not empty, then it will return the value from the front position. So that means it will return this value 10, and the front will be incremented. That means the front will point to this next position. Now after performing this operation, if we see that the front is greater than rear, that means our queue is empty. Then we're gonna assign both the front and the rear to -1. That means we're gonna reset our queue. So if we call the dequeue function again, so this time the front is pointing to this 1th position, so it will return the value 20, and after that the front will be pointing to this next position. And again, if we call this dequeue function again, so first of all it will return the value from the front position, so it will return 30, and then the front will be incremented. So that means the front will point to the next position. So then it will check if the front is greater than rear. So you can see the front is now greater than the rear position. So that means our queue is empty. So in that case we have to reset our queue. So the front and the rear, both of them should point to the -1. So that means the front and the rear pointer, both of them will pointing to the -1. So which indicates all the elements from the queue has been removed. So this is the way we can perform the dequeue operation. So let's now see how we can implement the isEmpty function. So this function used to check if our queue is empty or not. So in this function we are simply going to check if the front pointer is pointing to -1, that means our queue is empty. So here the front pointer is pointing to -1, that means the queue is empty. Otherwise we can say that the queue is not empty. So let's now see how we can implement the isFull function. So this function used to check whether the queue is full or not. So if the rear pointer is pointing to the size of the array -1, so that means if the rear pointer is pointing to the size of the array -1, that means the last position of the array. In that case, we can say that our queue is full. So that means we cannot add any more elements into the queue. So let's now see how we can implement the size function. So this function returns the number of elements we have into our queue. So here is the function to get the size of the queue. Inside the function, first of all, we're gonna check if the queue is empty, then we're gonna return 0. Otherwise, we're gonna perform this calculation. So we're gonna subtract rear minus front plus 1. Suppose inside the queue we have 3 elements. That means the front will point to this first element and the rear will point to this last element. Now to get the size of this queue, we have to subtract rear minus front. So that means rear is pointing to the second index. So 2 minus front is pointing to the 0th index. 2 minus 0 plus 1. So this is 3. So that means the size of the queue is 3. We have 3 elements into our queue. So this way we can calculate the size of our queue. So this way we can implement the queue using the array, and we can implement different operations. Like an example, we can implement the Enqueue operation, Dequeue operation, and also we can implement the isEmpty, isFull, and also we can get the size of our queue. So hope you understand the concept. See you in the next one. Take care.